Welcome to the Dibley Dairies for this week. This week we're going to be thinking thought for the week about the story of the Good Samaritan, and I really wanted us to think in the Rural Challenge about bias and how we have bias and indeed prejudice in our village communities, and how we shouldn't let that creep through into our church communities and actions. We had sometimes it is about others. Years ago I had a PCC meeting where somebody said, I don't want that to support. We were doing something which was going to support some people in a big city, and she was really biased against that group of people, so I don't want to support them because I don't think they're using their resources well, and it was very ethnically based, and I was a bit despairing of that, I have to say. It was clear that that wasn't the view of the majority of people on the council, but even so it really opened up that, my goodness, are you really affected by that bias that you have so strongly still at this time? It could be simple, and it could be an internal bias. It could be a bias towards people from one family or another family, extended family within the village. It sometimes even is people who live in one area of a larger village. Oh well, we don't want to do that with those people because of whatever the bias is about. So it is something that we need to be conscious of and aware of. What is it that we do as an action as a church community which might be affected by both conscious or unconscious bias, and how do we deal with that in our decision making? Thought for the week this week is based on the story of the Good Samaritan, which is in Luke chapter 10 verses 25 to 37, and it's important to remember the structure of this story, because often in children's books we don't get the beginning and the end, we just get the story, but it's really important for us to understand why Jesus is telling this story. So at the beginning of the passage there's somebody talking to Jesus about loving your neighbour, and this person asks the question, who is my neighbour? He wants it really clarified who he should be caring for and what he should be doing, because he knows that in the Bible, in the scriptures, it says that you should love your neighbour. And so he's asking, and Jesus tells this story, and it's the story where somebody is injured on the road, on the Jericho road. They're attacked by robbers, they're left for dead. Two holy people walk by, and the person who picks up the injured person is a Samaritan. He puts him on his donkey, takes him to the inn, he leaves money for the innkeeper to look after him, saying that he'll be back, and check how the person is. So that's the structure of the story. We have to remember that Samaritans were hated, and when Jesus at the end of the story, at the end of the teaching, says who was the neighbour, the person who asked the question at the beginning couldn't even say the word Samaritan. It was like it would choke on him. He said the person who showed mercy, the person who was merciful, was the good neighbour. So Jesus is really challenging that person about what it means to love and to be merciful. And I have a story, I have two stories about this really, and I don't come out very well in either of them. I may even have talked about them here before. So the first story happened nearly 20 years ago. I was in Taunton Dean as services. I was driving somewhere, I was going to run out of petrol, so I put some in at Taunton Dean services and was in the queue to pay. And at the very front of the queue was somebody who I think had been driving a lorry, paid for his fuel on his fuel card and was trying to buy a coffee with euros. Now at the time there was just no way of doing that, and he didn't have any other way to pay in sterling, and I was a few back in the queue, but I could have paid for that cup of coffee. I could have just walked forward and said, actually, just let me get that, and that would have been the really merciful and good neighbourly thing to do, and I didn't do it because I was shy or I was distracted. Probably then I wasn't really confident enough to do it, to upset the apple cart. But then about 3, and I thought to myself, oh, this is my great example, I'm always going to do it, I'm always going to be better at that. Well, about 3 years ago, I was on a bus in a big city. I was there doing quite a complicated thing. I was really distracted, and vaguely I was aware that someone had got on the bus at the front, and for some reason their bus pass wasn't valid, and they didn't have any money, and I'd like to say that I got up and paid their bus fare, but I didn't, and I don't know why I didn't. Maybe because I wasn't really thinking about it, or I'd let myself get distracted, or I wasn't feeling brave on that particular morning to go up and just say, it's all right, I'll get that. Or it might even have been something really practical, like I tapped in contactlessly and I didn't know how else I could tap in, what else I might have been. I mean, I think I could have solved that now, but I didn't do it. And I think it's a real challenge for us, both individually and as church communities. How is it that we are supposed to be showing mercy and love to our neighbours? Do we let ourselves get distracted about that? How do we think about it? How do we think about that when it might be interacting with people that we find it difficult to interact with, or we don't understand, or we might have some generational judgment about these people? What is it that we should be doing to be showing mercy, which perhaps we aren't doing? And I think that's a really important challenge for us today. The Dibley moment of the week this week is about a donkey. We know that there was a donkey in the story of the Good Samaritan. We know that the person helping put the injured person on their donkey. One of the places where I worked had, by legend, a donkey buried in the churchyard. I was never sure how true it actually was, but they were really proud that they had had a donkey buried in their churchyard. And then I moved to a different place, and one of the churches where I worked with there apparently had a horse buried in their churchyard, also according to legend. Well, that's it for the Dibley Dairies for this week. I pray that you and your village, however large or small, have a really blessed week where you can show mercy and be shown mercy.